Alright guys, you can see on the whiteboard today that I have a couple meetings this afternoon, so sorry for not being here. Today we are going to watch episode 2 of America the Story of Us, and it's going to take us back to not quite the beginning of the Revolutionary War, but pretty close. We're actually going to write down answers and follow along with questions for this because we wrap up this unit with a Socratic seminar, and we are going to use this as evidence for some of our answers for the questions we come up with. So the way that I'm going to have this work is I'm going to preview for you the questions of each section, and then I'm going to have the guest teacher play the video for that section, and then you're going to come back to this video and I'm going to talk you through the answers and kind of like expand like I was able to do for my other classes when I give you guys the same. So everybody should have a copy of this. I understand that while the video is going on, it's hard sometimes to write down the answers while you're paying attention. So as long as you're paying attention, there shouldn't be talking. You should all be sitting in your assigned seats. As long as you're paying attention, then you're fine. And when we go over the answers, you're welcome to just jot down the notes. So the first one is going to show us New York and the British coming to New York. So the first question says, contrast the power of the British to that of the colonists defending Kips Bay. So listen for the facts that they give you about the experience of the British and the power of the British compared to that of the colonies. Question 2 says, what document inspired the soldiers to fight harder because it included rights for all Americans? Question 3, how long did Washington's troops hold the British? And question 4, what was it like on the prison ships? It's going to show you that and kind of give you some details about that. So I'm going to have you watch this first section, then you're going to come back and I'll explain some of the answers. Okay, so after that clip, the first question is about contrasting the power of the British to that of the colonies. Hopefully you guys came up with some of these examples. The first one says that Washington's troops were untrained and volunteer soldiers. And that's a big deal because one guy actually points out in the video that the British soldiers were fighting for a king, so it was like their job. They were hired to do this. And that is different than fighting for your life and for your country and for your freedom. And so this first one, although they're untrained, they're people that want to be there for the right reasons. And that's maybe going to benefit the American Army in the end. Second one says the British were substantially more powerful, better trained, and better equipped. We know this already. They had better weapons. They had more ammunition. They brought their navy of 400 ships. They had more than the Continental Army, for sure. The third one says British outnumbered the Americans 2 to 1. So they came with twice the amount of soldiers to the colonists. And that's advantageous for any military. The third one says one British man of war had as much firepower as an entire American force. And that just kind of goes back to the weapons that they were able to use and the ships they were able to use with the cannons. You can see in that clip from Kips Bay how powerful the cannons on the ships were shooting at foot soldiers. It just wasn't a comparison, and it was out of the league of the Continental Army. Hopefully you also caught on to this, which I think is a very interesting fact. And on average, British soldiers have 6 times more combat experience. So compared to the Continental soldiers, these British soldiers have been in combat 6 times more, which is a huge advantage. You know strategy, you know how to come back from a defeat, you just know war tactics a lot better. Second question, you should have the Declaration of Independence. They talk about that. This was a very uniting document for everybody because it had that line of, we are all entitled to these inalienable rights because we're human beings, and so people wanted to fight for that. Number 3 says, how long did Washington's troops hold the British? And the answer is 1 hour. Not long at all. Pretty disappointing. Pretty disappointing for Washington. Doesn't feel like they're going to be very successful in this war. And then the prison ships are described. Pretty disgusting. Hopefully you got some of this stuff. They described it like hell. Air so heavy and foul that they couldn't even burn a lamp. People would die and they wouldn't discover their dead bodies for days, and then they just dumped their dead bodies overboard. And years later, bones continue to wash up on the shore from these dead bodies. And somebody in the video said that now they do have a memorial for these men that died on these ships, but they didn't for a while. And there were a lot of them, right? 9 out of 10 prisoners died. And they said that that was 3 times more than people that died in actual combat. which is incredible. There's a lot of disease. They're all packed in together, and that poses a big problem. So the next set of questions that you're going to look at for the next section kind of takes us on a part of the revolution that we haven't really looked at, and that's what's going on kind of in the frontier area or the wilderness area, where there's no battle rules, and the Continental Army soldiers are going to take things into kind of their own hands. So you're going to be introduced to a British General, John Burgoyne, and they're going to show you what his plan was and what he wanted to do. They're going to introduce you to a guy named Daniel Morgan and his riflemen, and have you answer the question, what advantages did those guys have? Why did they kill the native scouts first is question number 7. What rule did the rebels break and why? And what happened after Burgoyne surrendered? So I'm going to have you watch this part until about 24 minutes and then come back and I'll give you the answers.